term brother, sister, the family of God, the household of God, people hear that today and they go, okay, yeah, it's kind of passe, old language, doesn't mean anything. Why is it important for us to identify that that was a very real thing in the ancient world, and it still has a role to play within our contemporary society and understanding of church in our theology today?
And it still is very powerful in majority world settings, where the conditions that Christians face now are very similar to what Christians face in the first century. That language becomes the go-to language for the church planters that we call the apostles, because so many who came into the Christ cult, let's call it that because that's what it looked like to anyone on the outside, anyone who joined the Christ cult came under scrutiny from their natural families.
I mean, for crying out loud, Jesus is saying, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood. It's like, okay, that sounds like a cult.
That's pretty weird.
It just does.
I mean, think the Kool-Aid sounds better than blood.
Yeah, that just doesn't sound so good right now. I mean, the Jewish Secret Service is at the door. They're monitoring us. I mean, it's the same idea.
And the day came when they were in the first century. There would come in maybe the early second century and following, informers on the Christ cult. What's this that's growing up in our midst? So when Jesus said to Peter and the other disciples, there's no one who has left mother or father or brothers or sisters or children or houses or fields that will not receive in this life 100-fold mothers and brothers and sisters and children and fields and houses, and in the life to come, in the age to come, eternal life. But it was so important with the loss of family connection, certainly the loss of family support, the winning of family disdain, that converts to the Christ cult find in one another people who are willing to take on the roles and responsibility and the level of commitment to one another that blood family typically did and would have done if they didn't convert in the first place. And by the way, this is very similar to what Philo, at least, says Jewish communities did for the Gentiles who converted to the synagogue. They welcomed them in and in effect to the brother and sisterhood of this family that wasn't a natural family, but was going to take on that level of commitment and support to sustain people in their new faith. So yeah, it was vitally important in the first century. It came with a bonus, by the way, because there's a very well articulated ethic of how brothers and sisters ought to relate to one another. And that ethic overlaps significantly with the ethics we find in the New Testament. Everything Paul has to say about putting competition to the side and cooperation to the fore, about preferring one another in honor rather than seeking to establish precedence over your fellow Christians, forgiveness freely offered rather than holding grudges. All of these things were woven into the way Greek and Roman ethicists told brothers and sisters to behave to each other. So there's that bonus as well. And we frankly have lost a great deal of the gift of being part of the Christ cult. When we might still say brother occasionally. I mean, we don't in the United Methodist Church because that's just weird, but in some churches we still talk about brothers and sisters. But when we stop living as brothers and sisters to each other because we're related by blood, by the blood of Christ, we really denied one another a social network of support and reinforcement and acceptance and what have you, that was a vital part of what made the church grow in its earliest centuries.